Thank you, Steve. Good morning. This is some work I started at Imperial before I moved off to Bristol. And so it's just important to reference that. And Yelena was my pediatric advice on the subject. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know. And certainly it's a message that's already out there. But it is nice to see the evidence and the pictures that go with that evidence. It enables us to confidently answer the question when it's asked. So the background was that we weren't sure. We thought we weren't sure perhaps whether preemptive renal transplantation, as compared with non-preemptive renal transplantation, was there a benefit to it in children? Because there seemed to be a benefit in adults. So in favor of preemptive transplantation is that we avoid all the problems that build up when we're on dialysis. In children in particular, it avoids what's often quite mutilating surgery. And what parents will often say to you is, I don't want another thing, another tube, another procedure for my child. We've got guidelines that say children should be going on to peritoneal dialysis as first line. Quite often parents are against that. They say, no, I don't want that. They've already got a line in their neck. And what they'll all want is the kidney transplant. The other thing is that it's cost effective always in the long run to have a transplant, because we avoid the procedures associated with dialysis, we avoid the dialysis, and it varies, but about 8 years ago I did a cost analysis and it took 3 years to break even after a kidney transplant, and then it persists for the whole life of that kidney. So this is the most controversial section, and this is what you may come up against when you're asked about it. Some people will still say that they think that there's increased rejection, because what you should do is allow the child to become uremic, because then their immune system won't work properly after the transplant. I won't say anything further on that. The other thing is that they might suggest that the child should go on to dialysis to really feel what that's like, so that they know what they're competing for when they get the transplant. This might be more relevant for those in the transitional phase, from let's say 13 years upwards. So, onto the methodology. We went very standard methodology. 2 of us doing a search, independently looking at all the records and following the guidelines according to PRISMA. That's the PRISMA diagram. Unfortunately, the search did churn out rather a lot. Luckily, many were duplicates. Lots came out that had CMV on them because of preemptive management of CMV and so on. Anyway, all of those were excluded. We're left with 18 to talk about and 11 with numbers that we could crunch. Those are the 18. As you can see, there's a good spread from around the world, many registry analyses and many retrospective analyses. So here's the first result. I used the endpoint of death as my endpoint. And this is in agreement with yesterday. And what it says that actually there's no difference in the death of, or should I say, the patient survival when it comes to preemptively or not preemptively transplanting them. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise. Children often are only on dialysis for a short time as a bridge to having a transplant. And also, they don't have the opportunity, usually, to build up all the morbidities, and certainly don't have the cardiovascular risk yet that adults will have. And so I don't think it's a surprise that they don't have any difference in survival. And it's important to tell them and to tell their parents this at the time. A transplant for a child is unlikely to save their life. This is the second one. Again, I've put the endpoint as the negative outcome, so allograft loss. And this is where it does show a difference. And so there is a difference in favor of a preemptive transplant in terms of allograft loss. That's quite a straightforward result. And it's mostly determined by the top 2 registry analyses there. And lastly, just in case anyone was concerned about the effects of uremia and so on, actually, there is a result in favor of less acute rejection with a preemptive transplant. Now, there could be a number of reasons for that, but certainly we can reject the statement that's often put to you about them needing to become uremic and so on. We can actually say that there may be less rejection if you transplant preemptively. So it's very simple. Three simple results. Looking at the weaknesses of the meta-analysis, there were more live donors in the preemptive transplant group. This wasn't exclusively live donor. It was very difficult to separate live and deceased donor. That is a weakness. The statistical software said it was low-level evidence and that there was heterogeneity between the studies. It's very difficult to avoid that also. What I can conclude is that preemptive transplantation does appear superior in terms of kidney survival and acute rejection. But it's important to remember that we're not actually saving life by doing this. Thank you.